Nadiara mugomina kude kuyarila. Na kuyara mugomina jumba diarira. Naro niara mugomina jelia diara bungala. Jalilu lila, wolie wala lim. Finalu lila, wolie waifu. Jalo din dingo wolila, wolie wala bamba fe. Mbaba o, hini wuluda jeliala, mandi shila da bini ma, yeah. Oh, I want to thank you, one and all, for honoring me with your presence today. I am Baba the Storyteller, and I practice an ancient art out of West Africa called Jalia. But I know many of you are probably really curious about the instrument I'm playing. So let me describe the instrument, and then we'll move on. Now, the instrument, the name of the instrument, it is called a kora. In English, it's spelled K-O-R-A. But you'll find it also spelled in French with a C, C-O-R-A. Now, the kora is an ancient harp of the oral historians of West Africa known as griots. And what were griots? Well, they were the living, breathing libraries of their people because not much was written, and most of what was retained that the people needed to retain, well, that was the job of griots, to retain the knowledge of their people, the myths, the legends, the stories, the history. So that griots would recite those things by using music, song, and dance. The kora is one of the instruments that was used. Now, let me start with the main part of the kora because to me this is really interesting. Do you see this huge piece right here? Okay, this is incredible. This huge piece right here is a pumpkin. Yes, it is a pumpkin, or a gourd, calabash, if you will. And it was cut open and it was covered with a cow skin. The cow skin was put on wet. And when it dried really hard like this. But this is not a drum. You don't beat on it. This is a harp. It is a harp. Now, the gourd, the cow skin, oh, and you have wood. So the handles that I hold it with are made of wood. And it's a special type of wood. In some parts of West Africa, this wood is called linge. And the neck of the instrument, which is really long, the neck of the instrument is made of the same wood. Same wood. And you might notice there's something on the neck. So let me show you this here. Can everyone see these little leather strips right here? These little leather strips, these are used to tune the instrument. They hold the strings, so the strings are wound through on each side. And these are moved up and down to get the tuning. So they go from these little leather strips, the strings, and they come across the instrument to the bridge. This is the bridge. The strings cross over the bridge, and there's 21 strings. And then they come over to the bottom of the instrument, and they're anchored by this metal piece right here, if you can see it. Now, a little secret. If you pull this metal piece out, the entire instrument falls apart. You never want to do that. Ever. Trust me. So that's the kora. Now, a little bit about the type of storytelling that we're about to jump into. I've traveled all over the world, and I speak quite a few different languages. But this culture of Jalia, the craft of the griot, oh, it is so special to me. In fact, one of the first things I learned in Jalia, I learned a song that celebrated the craft of Jalia. Let me teach it to you because it's going to come in handy for us. You need to know this. Just repeat after me. Now, it might be a little difficult, but don't worry. We're going to get on the other side of this. If you've never spoken Bamananko, it's okay. Just repeat what you hear. So repeat these words. Ye Jalia alaleka Jaliada. Okay, this is not too hard, right? It's not too hard. It's not too hard. But now we're going to start putting some of the words together so that they make a phrase. And don't worry, I'll tell you what they mean. I'll tell you why we use this. But I want you to just jump into this and experiment with me. See if you can do it. Okay, one more time. Ye jalia. Now here's where it gets a little difficult. Here's where it gets a little difficult. Ala le kajalia da. Make sure you make the K sound. Make it kind of hard. That helps us transition in the sentence. One more time. After me. Ye jalia. Ala le kajalia da. Now let me tell you something. These words that you're saying belong to a song that is more than 800 years old. I am not kidding you. This song is over 800 years old. It dates back to the 13th century Mali Empire, and it celebrates the role of griots. In fact, the opening of the song is Jalia. That opening of the song is the word for the craft of the griots. It's everything they do. It's singing and dancing and, well, telling stories to transmit their history, to make sure that people have a knowledge of their past. And that's what they use. That craft is called jalia. Now, the other part, ala leka jalia da. Because this language is a tonal language, depending on how you say it, it could have so many different meanings. But basically, this is a gift of our ancestors. This craft of jalia is a gift of our ancestors. And let me tell you how it was used. It was used when griots would gather, or sometimes when they would gather others together in order to hear the stories, the tales, the history, learn about their culture. So a griot, a man or a woman, they both basically have the same job, might approach a village and sing out, "Yeah, Jalia." And then the people who would hear it, they would know that it was time to gather. So they would come, but as they come toward the center of the village, the gathering place, they would sing back, "Yeah, Jalia." And then the griot, she or he, would go to the center of the village and continue singing, probably with drummers and other singers and dancers. And they would sing out, "Ala leka jalia da." And as the people gathered around, well, the people coming, they would sing back, "Ala leka jalia da." And then once all of the people were gathered together, that would be the time that they would start with the narration or the stories or teaching of history. Interesting, isn't it? Now, how did I learn about all these things? Lots of traveling, a ton of traveling. I have traveled all over the world. I spend more time visiting schools all over the world, doing a little bit about what we're about to do. And I think one of the most exciting things I have ever done in my travels, well, is probably my travels throughout West Africa, where I learned much of the craft. In fact, there was a point in West Africa where I remember I learned a very valuable lesson, It was in 2008. Oh, I never will forget this. In 2008, I had traveled to the country of Mali, West Africa. And anytime I travel, one of the things I do, no matter where I go, I don't care whether it's Europe, Africa, or Asia, I'm always seeking to hear more stories and to learn from people. Well, I had traveled to Mali, West Africa, in search of stories, wanting to learn from a master storyteller. And I had already spent time in the Gambia, Senegal, Guinea, other countries, learning from other master storytellers. So I had gone to Mali in search of a master storyteller to learn from. And I stayed outside of the main city. The main city of Mali is called Bamako. And I stayed outside of the main city in a small town called Intomikorobugu. I know. Okay, I'll put it on the screen. I know you want to know how to spell it. Some of you want to say it. Intomikorobugu. You have to work on that. Okay, but when I got to Intomikorobugu, everyone in the place where I was staying talked about this master storyteller named Basse Traore. Traore is a noble name. There's different levels and social levels in Bamana culture. I won't get into it, but last names such as Keita, Traore, those are names of nobles, descendants of noble families, of kings and queens. So when I heard the name Basse Traore, I got immediately excited. So I set up a time with someone who knew him that he would come to my room, which was unusual because usually you went to elders and, well, he was willing to come to me. So we set up a date, and I never will forget this. This is one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned in my life. We set up a date. It was a morning that he was going to come to my room. But the day before, I went to the market and I bought some traditional kola nuts. It's an offering that you give elders when you visit them. There are red kola nuts, white kola nuts. They have symbolic meaning. And there's a ritual behind meeting with elders where you present them with kola nuts. Now, I purchased kola nuts. I put them in bananas. I went through everything to prepare for the ritual to meet my elder and hopefully be honored by the stories he would share with me. And in fact, being honest with you, I couldn't sleep too well that night. No, I couldn't. I was so excited that I stayed up most of the night. And then in the morning, I heard a knock at my door. I opened my door and I look, and there's a 5-year-old boy standing in my doorway. 5, no kidding. He announced himself. Je m'appelle Baba the Storyteller. He spoke French. My name is Baba the Storyteller. He let me know in French that he was there to share stories with me. This 5-year-old was the master storyteller everyone had been telling me about. And I was thrown aback a little because all of my other travels, I had met 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds, but here I was standing before a 5-year-old. He kicked off his flip-flops. He was wearing flip-flops, and he just marched into my room right past me and said, "Come, sit." And he had this air of authority. I don't know if you've ever heard this term. Down south, we used to say some young people have old souls. This child definitely had an old soul. And I had to compose myself. I had to deal with many of my ways of conditioning that kind of let me know, what am I going to learn from a child? But I let go of those things. I went and sat down. And Basse, well, he began sharing a story with me. Do you want to hear that story? I know you do. So I'm going to share it with you, but let's do it this way. That song I taught you, let's use that song. Just after me one more time, sing this song. Yeah, Jalia. Alaleka Jaliada. Okay, sometimes I'm going to be playing and singing, and when I sing those words, when you hear those words, I want you to sing back. All right? And then if it feels right, if it takes us there, I'll share the story that Basse taught me with you. Now, I'm going to sing a whole lot of words you don't know, but don't worry about all those words, okay? I'm going to sing those sort of like to prepare us for a story, the way the griots do. But whenever you hear the Ye Jalia, don't forget your part. Nyate jalia nye nyakale di bi jalia te korobo gajeli ke ninke jali ke badi unla ye yo kala ambia sinana kumbemba jali musanin jale kelu ambia sinana. Listen carefully, your part's coming up. Get ready. Vula vula julula, ivola vula kora jaluma. Ambia sinana, kumbemba jali musanin jale kelu. Ambia sinana. Okay, after me. Now after me. Here we go. Yeah, jalia. Alaleka jaliada. Yeah, jalia. Alaleka jaliada. Ambia sinana, kumbemba jali musanin jale kelu. Ambia sinana. There was once a village of farmers, and these farmers, they were famous for, well, their ability to grow produce. It was said in this village that the people could drop a seed on the ground and it would have no problem growing overnight. Now, don't forget, when I get to your part, be ready to sing, all right? Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada. So the people in this village, they enjoyed their craft of farming, and they enjoyed being famous for this. But one morning, the people, when they woke up and they went out to their fields, they discovered an entire field of corn was gone. Acres and acres of corn gone overnight. It had been there the night before when they had gone to sleep, but by the next morning it was gone. The people said, who could have done this? What thief came into the night and stole all of our corn? No one knew. Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada, ambia sinana, kumbemba jeli muzaninja lekelu, ambia sinana. The next morning, the people woke up, and again, an entire field, but this time an entire field of cabbage, gone, disappeared during the night. The king said, we must do something about this. If this continues soon, we will have no food for ourselves to provide for ourselves. This will destroy our village. We must find out who is stealing from our fields during the night. So the people decided that they would stay up all night to figure out who was stealing their food. Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada. So the people stayed up, and well, you know how it is. At a certain time, you start getting sleepy. Your head might start nodding. You might start trying and continuing to try to stay awake, but it's hard to stay awake. But then the people heard something. They heard something, and it was early in the morning, late at night, early in the morning. They heard a sound. It sounded like this. It went whoosh, whoosh. The people ran outside, all of them, to see what the sound was. They looked up in the sky, and up in the sky was a giant bird. A bird bigger than a whale. In fact, it was like a whale with wings. Its beak was bigger than a building. It swooped down out of the sky, opened its beak, and it scooped up an entire field of carrots and flew off. The king began yelling, follow the bird, follow the giant bird. Let us see where it's going. Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada. They followed the bird to a baobab forest. And baobab trees are as huge as buildings. The bird, it flew into a tree, it landed, and it disappeared into the foliage of the baobab tree. The people now knew what was stealing their crops. So they headed back to the village. And the king, he sat on his throne trying to figure out what they could do about this bird. Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada. Bula bula tulula, iboda bula kora jaluma. Ambia sinana, kumbemba jeli muzaninja lekelu. Ambia sinana. So the king, he sat on his throne trying to figure out what to do. And then all of a sudden, he had an idea. The king is sitting on his throne when he gets this idea. He says, I know just what to do. The baobab tree is the home of this bird. If we chop down the tree, the bird will have to find a new home and leave us alone. So the king, he kept thinking and thinking, who can chop down this tree? Who can do this? So he called together the strong men of the village. And when the strong men of the village came, the king explained that if they did not do something about this bird, it would destroy their village. Their people would have nothing to eat. So he asked the strong men of the village, "Will you chop down the tree?" And the strong men of the village, they said, "Yes, we will chop down the tree." So the strong men of the village, they took their sharp implements, their axes, their saws, and they headed to the giant baobab tree. When they got there, the strong men of the village immediately began chopping into the tree, and they began sawing into the tree, chopping and sawing and sawing and chopping, when they heard a sound. It sounded like this. Tige tige bala konen ven kagalamanjang. Kajugun go bala konen ven kagalamanjang tige tige. The strong men of the village said, "Did you hear that? Where did that come from?" It came from up in the tree. It was the song of the bird. Every time the bird sang, the strong men's hearts would grow bigger, their hands would grow weak. They dropped their axes and their saws, and they began walking back to the village. When the king saw them approaching the village, the king, he was so happy. He said, "The strong men have returned, and they made quick work of it. They have chopped down the tree. Thank you for chopping down the tree." And the strong men of the village said, "No, no, no. We did not chop down the tree." And the king said, "But why not?" And the strong men of the village said, "The song of the bird is too beautiful. We could not chop down the tree. You must find someone else to chop down the tree." And the strong men, they walked away. So now the king is back where he started. And he's sitting there and he's going, "But there is no one. Who would I call on? The strong men could not chop down." And then he got an idea. Why did I not think of this at first? I will call on the strong women of the village, and they will chop down the tree, and I know they will do it. He called all of the strong women of the village together. He explained how their village, it was going to be decimated, destroyed, if this bird continued stealing their crops. And he asked the strong women of the village if they would chop down the tree, and the strong women of the village said, "We will chop down the tree." So the strong women of the village, they headed to the tree, taking their axes, their saws, their sharp implements. And the strong women of the village immediately began chopping into the tree and sawing into the tree when they heard a sound. Tige tige bala konen enfen kagalamanjang. Kajugun ko bala konen enfen kagalamanjang tige tige. Every time the bird sang, the strong women's hearts grew bigger, their hands weak. They dropped their axes, their saws, their sharp implements, and they began walking back to the village. When the king saw them, he was overjoyed. "Oh, the strong women have chopped down the baobab tree. The bird has been sent away. They have saved our village." And the strong women said, "No, no, no. We did not." And the king said, "But why not? Why did you not chop down the baobab tree?" And the strong women said, "The song of the bird is too beautiful. We could not chop down the tree. You must find someone else to do this." And the strong women of the village left. So now the king, he's sitting there, he's crying into his hands like this. No, no, our village is going to be destroyed. This village is going to be destroyed. And as he's crying, the children of the village approach him. And the children ask the king, "Why are you crying, our king?" And the king, he's crying. He says, "I'm crying because the bird is destroying our village. Every night he is stealing our crops, and no one can chop down the tree. The strong men would not chop down the tree. The strong women could not chop down the tree. And now I have no one. Our village is going to be ruined." The children, they looked at the king and said, "We will chop down the tree." And the king, he looked at the children and he said, "But you are only children. You are little ones. Look at you. You have small legs and small arms. You do not have the strength of the strong men or the strong women. You cannot do this." Well, the children, they told the king, "Yes, we can." And the children headed to the tree. And when the children got to the tree, they picked up the axes, the saws, and they were heavy for the little ones, but they picked them up and they tried the best they could to chop into the tree, but it was kind of weak, the way they were chopping. They would chop, chop, and so, and chop, chop. But they kept trying, and then they heard a sound. Tige, tige, bala konen fin kagalamanjang. Kajugun go, bala konen fin kagalamanjang, tige, tige. The children said, "Did you hear that? Where did it come from? It's the bird in the tree." But when the children heard the song, they did something completely different than the strong men and the strong women. When the children heard the song, the children sang back. Tige, tige, bala konen fin kagalamanjang. Every time the birds sang, the children sang. And then the children decided to turn this into a game. Yes. Now, I don't know if you know this about children, but just let me advise you. When it comes to playing, children can play all day long for hours and hours and hours nonstop when it comes to playing. So these children turned this into a game. Every time the bird would sing, they would sing back. And they would chop to the rhythm of the song. Tige, tige, bala konen en fin kagalamanjang. Kajugan go, bala konen en fin kagalamanjang. Tige, 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 bala konen en fin kagalamanjang. Kajugan go, bala konen en fin kagalamanjang. Tige, tige. Now, this game, this play time went on for hours and hours and hours. I don't know how long it went on. But eventually the baobab tree fell over. It came down. The giant bird flew out of the tree and away to find another home somewhere else, probably in a distant, far-off land. Well, the children, they returned back to the village singing, Tige, tige, bala konen en fin kagalamanjang. And when the king saw the children approaching, singing, dancing, having been gone forever, the king shook his head and he said, "I knew I could not rely on the children. All the children want to do is play and sing and have fun. I knew they could not chop down the tree." And the children yelled out, "We chopped down the tree. We have saved our village." And the king said, "But how? How were you able to chop down the tree?" And the children said, "Work need not be hard. If we can play together and work together, we can accomplish anything." And they reminded the king of an ancient proverb that he had once shared with them. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada, ambia sinana, kumbemba jali musaninjalekelu, ambia sinana. Now earlier I told you I had learned a valuable lesson when I went to West Africa, to Mali, studying under the famous storyteller Basse Traoré. The lesson I learned, was this. Wisdom is not so much dependent upon age as it is experience. I think in our society we have a saying that says, "Never judge a book by its cover." So I think we can learn from one another, regardless of age or what our culture is or who we are or our gender, if we are open to learning from one another. Yeah, Jalia, alaleka Jaliada, ipula la chulula, ibola bola kora jaluma, ambia zinana, oh bemba jali.